this isn't real, and I'm concerned about it. So up there in Canada, Alberta, many advocacy centers give children toys, and there's concern that this could be viewed as a bribe for telling the interviewer what happened. And that is a concern, especially when it's this overloaded. So what advocacy centers do to try to avoid that situation where only the children that tell what happened or go in for a forensic interview get the toy is to make sure that every child that comes into that building, so this child's siblings, any child that comes in, they go into that playroom and they all take home a stuffed animal so that they can say that these kids, these toys are for everyone. So really, yes?
Do they do that before the interview?
Well, I mean, they don't think about this stuff. There are, in one state, it was, and after the child has the interview, that we present this handmade quilt made by the ladies in the community, and we say, you did a really good job talking in there. And I'm like, no, don't do that, don't do that. So yeah, you have to be aware of that. I'm always thinking about the appellate issues, and that it's really important for us to be fair about this. So that's why we train about it. So again, some give the children little stuffed animals, like little black stuffed animals, like here's your memory of this. And I'm just not that comfortable with that unless you take great steps to avoid that happening. So I just want to show you an interview. How are we doing on time? We have 45 minutes?
Uh-huh.
That illustrates how you can kind of unconsciously introduce fantasy into this. And this is a case where a 4-year-old had been sexually assaulted by her brother, and she did not want to talk about it. And the interviewer got a little desperate about her refusal to answer any more questions. And this is what happened. We'll talk a little bit about this.
Celeste participates in our child interviews. Probably the most memorable one. I had a 5-year-old talking about some tough stuff with her older brother, and just constantly, I don't know. And the child interview specialist asked her to just tell Stilson what happened, and she came out with it. And I was just, my mouth, my chin was to the floor. I had thrown my pen down thinking this kid is not going to talk, and it was going to be very disappointing. But Stilson here turned it around for us, so I was a believer from that point on. So
did you talk about secrets or telling or not telling?
Secrets.
What did he say?
I forgot.
Are you saying you forgot because it's hard to talk about? Do you feel safe from Mary? And if you talked about it, would it help you make you feel safe? Well, hold on that baby, because he's sleeping over here. Why don't you come have a seat again?
Yay!
Stilson really wants to hear about what you have to say about Mary. You're not doing it?
He wants to hear.
We want to hear about Mary. Well, just tell Stilson. See, you want to hear about Mary. That's why he's here. You went to suck his wiener? One time or more than one time? A lot of times.
Okay, so what issue do you see there? Okay, come on. I'm going to pick on you.
Well,
Think about the fantasy thing.
yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of fantasy, but also arguing that she's tricked into saying it, or
Well, the thing is what's Stilson doing there? He's just like, he's sacked out like Molly. Does Stilson want to hear what she has to say? You know, he wants to hear what you have to say. It's really important that you just treat the dogs like dogs. Don't give them human characteristics. We do this all the time. Human beings do this, but you have to be really careful not to do this in this situation. I want to tell you, that way, and at the time we didn't get it. We didn't understand. The detective thought this was great, but you just have to pay attention. Worst case scenario that I've heard about this is a child going into court before she testifies with, what kind of dog was that? That big dog from Texas?
Oh, the Newfoundland.
The Newfoundland dogs. And it was
Not a courthouse.
no,
So
this
not
was a pet
courthouse.
therapy dog with the dog's owner, and she says to the child, Sadie was hit when she was a puppy. She was hit really badly, but Sadie got through this. So you go into court there and you be like Sadie, and you tell the jury what happened. And so, first of all, that didn't happen to Sadie. And second, that's really putting pressure on this child if a defense attorney ever heard that, that would be a real concern. Now, in terms of the kids talking to the dogs, the flip side of this is one case in the county where I live, in Snohomish County. This 11-year-old boy comes in and sees this young woman who's going to interview him, and he's just been sexually assaulted by a teenage boy. And he said, "I'm not talking to you." And then he sees, what was her name? Ariel on the couch, and he said, "I'll tell her." And she said, "Are you sure?" "I'll tell her. You have to go now." And so she's like, she worked with Ariel for years. Well, okay. So she went around, and you can look through a one-way mirror to see the interview. That's where the detectives are. Or you can look through a video camera. And so he crawled over to where Ariel was. She saw him do this. It's being recorded. He lifts up her ear and says, "I'm so sorry, I have to tell you these disgusting things." And then he proceeds to tell her everything. And this was totally pure. It was unprompted in any way at all. And he felt secure that, that Ariel would keep his secret. So that was okay. That was his idea. It wasn't an adult's idea suggesting that he do that. And it is because dogs, I hate to say, people always say they're non-judgmental, but this is a case where it's really true because the dog doesn't care, is not going to react non-verbally to what they're listening to. So that's very cool. So we have to be important. I use this to emphasize how defense attorneys are justifiably concerned about this and how we all have to be mindful about doing this properly so that it is fair to everyone. So the other thing that I want to show, and I think we have enough time for it, is a case where this girl had been sexually assaulted by multiple people. She was 12 at the time. She went through great difficulty talking about it, had 2 or 3 unsuccessful interviews. This was going to be her last one. And Jeter happened to be available on that particular day for this interview. And what I'd like for you to do is, at the end where you see her, this girl interacting with Jeter, just pay attention what she's doing with him. You'll also appreciate how Jeter is working through this because she is petting him constantly through this 90-minute interview. And at the very end, he kind of lets loose a sigh, as does she. And I think in terms of this being therapeutic, having Jeter with her during that situation not only helped her talk about what happened, but made her feel better during the process.
In the first interview that I used the dog, I used Jeter. And if I remember correctly, I wasn't prepared to use the dog that way. That day, I remember when I first heard about the dogs being used, I was like, well, that's great, but what exactly do we do with these dogs? They're there, okay, that's nice, but I don't really understand how you use them. And on that day, I knew I was doing an interview. A girl who was coming in. It was about 11, I believe. She was on the older end. But I didn't expect to use the dog that day. I thought, I'm not really comfortable using a dog. I don't really know any of the commands. I don't really know what I'm doing. But what happened is there was another she had introduced the dog to the child, Emily, and she had the dog do some commands with the child, brought the dog in, set the dog up in the bed, and the child sat up with the dog, had the dog throughout the interview. Now, what was really nice in that case is that this was a girl who had been a victim of mental illness. And we were told just before the interview, as the detective was coming in, that we told the detective, oh, we have a dog here, and the detective was like, that's great, because she's been in counseling, and the counselor says she hasn't been able to get through any of the sessions without breaking down and talking about it. And actually, Mom asked me if they could bring their dog in to Chihuahua or something. So I told her, no, you're going to take her to the dog for us. Because the mom knows it's like, she really likes dogs and going to be able to see her. So to just happen to have Jada there on that day was amazing. And she responded really well to how she made her. Throughout the interview, she sat next to him. She did get upset for the interview. So that was on there. She did stated how much it was in the interview. Just from her body language, she seemed to get a lot of people expressing. She was very large. She was how they were doing. It made a big difference for her to have her there. And then I just remember at the end of the interview, okay, it's over. I don't really know the command to get him up, but he knows it's over. He just got up on his own and it worked well. So that was my first experience in using the dogs. It just really demonstrated that, for some children, it can make a big difference for them to talk about these things that a lot of times they don't want to talk about. Okay, ready to go break? Okay, if you do want to leave, you can leave.
So for me, it's just really important and amazing how this girl was finally able to talk about it, which is very therapeutic, but at the same time was also comforted, and as she leaves that, has a positive memory of that situation, and especially after how she had been through. So I just think that for all of the hard things that we have to go through, to be able to provide a dog like that to help a child through this experience, and this is not closing argument yet, we still have some more to, but I mean, it takes some effort, but this is really worthwhile, and this is something that we need to include in the work we do. So then, this is the most controversial part of what these dogs do, is assisting witnesses when they testify in court. And this is very important, because what I've learned in the course of my career, and especially since I've taken on this nonprofit, is how damaging sexual assault, sexual abuse, bad experience have lifelong impact, negative impact on children's brains, and that we need to address that right from the start. The federal government is starting to recognize that, and is encouraging juvenile juvenile court judges to be trauma sensitive with offenders, because realize that they're out there committing crimes just like I realized in drug court, because they are, they are traumatized, and we need to be cognizant of that and help them through that. So it's hard to, as I mentioned before, you just get inured and desensitized to that stuff, and it's really hard to convince a judge that providing accommodations for vulnerable people is outside the norm by involving an animal in the process is something that should be considered. And as I mentioned before, I think a lot of judges just think that, well, this is just the cost of doing business, and we'll make do and we'll get on with it. And so for what's been the most helpful for me in terms of educating judges about this is to explain to them that, okay, we're trying to make it easier for this witness to get through this process, but judge, these dogs also facilitate the fact-finding process. We're here, it's a trial, we want to know what happened, we want to provide the jurors with as much information about what happened, so in this very important case, they can make the best decision possible. And when a person relives a traumatic event, they get overwhelmed by what occurred. They start experiencing the same physiologic reactions that happened at the time of the event, and this impacts their ability to speak. And when they can't speak, the jurors can't hear that. And why should the opposing side be able to take advantage of that situation when this person can't deal with that? And so I found this video that really illustrates this, what this looks like. So, and this is a domestic violence case where this teenage boy is talking about growing up in that household with his father.
We have a good 30 minutes or so before we heard the sliding glass door open. And one day he came in and he actually had pizza, Mexican pizza. And another day, everything went away, it was fine. Another day he came in, for no reason, he just smashed my mom tell you it's that cabinet there. Just thinking of just to the left of where they're playing, it's where my brother and I would play. My dad, he'd come home and we had to be working in sports and stuff, so. One time when I knew it was coming. I knew my brother, Bobby, I knew that he would be able to bear the brunt of it. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So that happens in trials and in jury trials. And I've had witnesses, that was end of story. And you don't get the evidence in front of the case. So these dogs can make a big difference. And the other thing that's really upset me a lot lately, talking about cortisol levels, Celeste talks about that all the time, is now it's becoming very common for defendants, as I mentioned earlier on, to represent themselves in court. And we have a lot of sex offenders doing this. In this past year, there have been 3 very prominent cases that have happened. And our U.S. Supreme Court has said that defendants have the right to face their accuser, and that a child as young as 4 has to be in court and go through that experience. And now on top of that, they have to confront, in this case, these 2 girls being cross-examined by their father about him sexually assaulting them. This happened in Georgia with parents that had committed brutal abuse and neglect upon their children, and the mother decided to show up in her jail garb with the stripes and make her son feel guilty about that. And make it extremely difficult for her two boys. And I'm happy to report that this was a conviction, and the other case was a conviction. There was ample evidence independent of the children. But this is becoming something that's very concerning, and in a case in Arizona, this very case, this went up to our U.S. Supreme Court, and the judges refused to consider it. They just said, well, this is, this is the way it goes. And so all the more reason to try to make these dogs available for these kids during this process. Not that we're not going to try again, because I think this really needs to be addressed. So, yes, we need more dogs like,
Emma.
This is Emma in New Mexico, helping kids through this process. We do need to be concerned about what the jury is going to think, because the defense attorney is worried, and this is totally justified, that people love dogs, especially this group seems to love dogs a lot. When you see that dog, you might feel more affinity for the witness, might feel like the dog enhances their credibility, especially if the dog is referred to as a therapy dog, which could be considered a comment on the evidence, because that could imply to the jury that this child is in fact a victim in need of therapy. These are the little things we have to be mindful of. So we need to be very careful about how we do this. But what I say is that this accommodation for children, because there's lots of case law that says that a child can hold a comfort item, or that the child can have a support person. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of cases where courts have said that these dogs are can be made available for that purpose, and I think they're the best, because I think a child clutching a teddy bear looks very, very vulnerable. And I think human support is the worst, because I've been noticing some of your faces out there. A lot of people nod along when I have some real fans out here that are keeping me going because they're nodding along with what I'm saying. But when a jury sees that, that's a problem. Or if a person looks angry, that could be a comment on the evidence. And these dogs can just be nearly invisible in court, because they're trained to be in the witness box. They're placed in the witness box outside the presence of the jury. The child comes in, or other vulnerable witness, and they testify. If the dog would appear a little bit, in South Carolina they put up a little shield to keep the jurors from seeing the dog in the witness box. Then the jurors leave, and the child and the dog leave the courtroom without there being that visible cue. This was Willow in Alabama, though. She didn't quite keep it all in there during that case. But that's why it's very important for the judge to tell the jurors, even though they don't see the dog and weren't there when the dog was put in place, there's a dog here. This is the reason for the dog. It's to provide, make people feel more comfortable. And you shouldn't let the dog's presence impact you in any way. In Washington State, judges were insisting that the dog could be there, but if the jurors saw the dog, that was a problem, and that could be a real issue on appeal. And what happens, though, is that although the dog may be able to stay like that, Molly hasn't done it yet, but these dogs snore. They'll snore, and when a dog is snoring during that process, it's very distracting to everybody, and sometimes they dream. So you have to let them know that the dog is there, but that is a lot worse, a lot less of a problem than they're actually seeing a dog snuggle with the child. So these are what we say in a pretrial motion, that how this should be handled in particular. And this is a picture of a man in his late 50s. This was the first case that went up to our state Supreme Court. And he operated on the level of a 6 to 12-year-old, and victim of terrible financial exploitation. And he got through that because Ellie made that possible. He felt like she protected her. And so we were very pleased that the first case that went up to our Supreme Court level in our state came out as an accommodation that was approved. And so now we have a precedent of these dogs helping not just children, but other vulnerable witnesses. And the legislation is getting to be any vulnerable witness that can do this. It's not just being limited to children or people with disabilities. So we haven't added Arizona on there, but there are now 11 appellate court decisions that have held that this is an appropriate accommodation. This was a big case in New York, State v. Tone, and this is the one that David Crenshaw made reference to. That's often referred to in these appellate court decisions. And the cases are falling into two groups. The appellate court cases have been that the judge has the discretion to allow this, kind of like under evidence rule 611A, just to make this a more smooth process and to diminish the likelihood that the witness will feel harassed, etc. In Washington and in California, at the pretrial hearing, they want the prosecution to show that this is necessary, essential for the child or vulnerable person to be able to testify. And in the case in New York, there was a social worker that worked at David's, the Poughkeepsie Children's Home, who provided expert testimony about what a difference the dog would make, and the court felt that this was appropriate. So I'm on our website, and if you get one of Molly cards, you'll see the link to our website. There's a whole legal section about how to make a bulletproof appellate court record at a pretrial motion. And it's all there, it's already written for you. You just kind of have to cut and paste and put in your state, and the analysis is there. All of the appellate court decisions are there in summary form and in totality. So we have found that when this is done properly, this really has limited the possibility of an issue on appeal. So we're going to end on some more fun stuff with Celeste.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Yes.
Okay, we have to leave a little bit of time for questions.
And to interact with Molly.
Exactly. So we didn't really indicate early in this program, what we do is help you develop Courthouse Dog program. That's what we spend, 90% of our time doing that. Yeah. So it just takes one person in an office that wants to do this to really make it work, but you're gonna have to bring everybody along with you. And we're really happy to work with you on every step along the way if you've gotten interested. We won't go through absolutely every one of these steps in detail, but if you're interested at all after hearing us talk, please reach out to us and let us help you.
You mentioned our
with these
manual.
different things. Yes, it's in here.
Okay.
Just some high points. The average program development somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000. This is Molly and one of her friends down in New Mexico. The different accredited service dog schools, some of them make their dogs available completely free of charge. Some of them charge you $10,000, but they come to you to do your team training, so you don't have to leave your office to come. They all have different systems. And you are very lucky here. There's a Canine Companions campus on Long Island. ECAT, where David gets his dogs from, is up in Connecticut. You know, no distance at all for you to go. And there are many other schools that would like to place dogs with you. This is Hayward raising money for a CASA organization down in Louisiana. She's been very successful with this. But you should know it takes 1 or 2 years to develop a program. It's not going to happen overnight. And at first when you prepare, it's really important to do a lot of research. One thing about facility dogs is that they don't have public access the way a service dog has. Since they're not helping someone with a disability, you have to have permission for them to come into the building. They have to be invited in. And so during the preparation, you've got to get, sometimes it's your presiding judge, sometimes it's courthouse security, it could be the sheriff's department, it could be your landlord. you've got to have permission for your dog to come to work. And if you're a nonprofit, you've got to get your board of directors on board with you. You've got to write a job description for your dog. And after all your preparation, it's going to take 6 to 18 months before the dog's there and ready to work. So please give us a phone call. Our numbers, Ellen and I both have our cell phone numbers and our email addresses on our website. And we answered calls today. We answer our phones, and we're happy to help you with all the steps. And this is a front page of our manual that's also on our website. It's about an 80 or 90 page manual that you can download that gives you examples and steps you through how to develop a program. Assistance Dogs International has a website that will give you all of the standards, they have a map that you can look up all the schools that want to place facility dogs in New York State. And so when you're thinking about the stakeholders, you've really got to think about everybody in your office, how they would feel about having a full-time dog, your director, your presiding judge. But we can give you some ways to persuade those people. We've worked with many programs around the country. The dog that Ellen was showing, Camry, is there because the person who wanted to be the handler gave a lasagna lunch and invited all the judges. And she provided all the food, and all they had to do was to watch our DVD about the dogs. So it was a great idea. We can help you find out how to persuade people. It's going to be really important that you have a really strong idea of what you want your dog to do. Do you want a dog that can go to court? Do you want a dog that's just going to work in the therapy wing of your child advocacy center? Not all dogs are alike, and not all dogs can do everything. It'll be important to get that written up. This is a picture, David, you don't know we use your picture on it. This is David with Ace. And I remember when you went to team training, you didn't think you were going to graduate either, just like Ellen. You thought,
That's
no
right.
way. And so, but every dog works with one person primarily and goes home with that person at night. The dog has to have a home. In the legal field, you almost always need a secondary handler also, because your primary handler is going to be busy on the case that doesn't need the dog and that sort of thing. But somebody's got to make a lifelong decision for the dog. I mean, that they will take care of the dog. And I have to tell you, one of the problems is you're going to have an office that either everybody's going to want to be the handler or nobody. You know, so choosing the right handler is important. One of the dogs we had, Karis, there were too many people that wanted to be the handler, and the elected prosecutor had an essay contest. So that everybody that wanted to be the handler could write an essay and he would make the decision. So, it's important. You can have a facility dog if you have other pets at home, but not if your pets are aggressive to other dogs. Molly is extremely submissive, and she has to feel safe at home. She couldn't live with an aggressive dog. I know, Ellen.
Oh, we have to show my favorite video.
Oh, your favorite video, I forgot. Okay.
It's just.
We're going to help you do this. Just call us and we'll
Right.
help you with this.